I was home alone one Friday night, asleep in my bed, as I had to get up early for a work meeting the next day. For some unknown reason, I woke up to the sound of my Alexa speaker going off, as I had set an alarm. This was very weird, as I had set my alarm for 8 a.m., but it instead woke me up at 5 a.m. I hit the snooze button and set my alarm for my actual time, but an hour later, Alexa woke me up again. This time, instead of the usual alarm music, Alexa said my full exact name and address, basically most of my confidential information. It was creepy as hell, and I was confused out of my mind and immediately figured that someone was hacking into it, as that was the most logical explanation. Either way, I turned it off and haven't used Alexa since. For a bit of backstory, my mom was dating an abusive prick at this time. We'll call him Ian. Because of Ian and the crazy fights they had gotten into, we couldn't lock up my house at all. He had kicked in both the front and the back door to the house, and they were never fixed. My mother and Ian were at the bar all day every day. I told you this so you wouldn't know why the house wasn't locked up and where my parents were when this happened. This incident occurred when I was 12 years old and my little brother was around 10. I was a really small girl at this age and my brother was sick all the time, so he was very tiny and frail. My mother and Ian were at the bar as usual. When you opened my front door, it would put you in the living room and you could see the back door. There was a hallway to the right that led back into the bedrooms, and that's where my brother and I were. We were in his bedroom with the door closed, playing something on a PlayStation. It was around midnight, or 1 a.m. to be exact, and we were having a good time when I heard a weird noise. My brother didn't hear it, and I didn't want to creep him out, so I told him that I wanted to go get a drink and told him to stay in the room and that I would bring him something. To get to my kitchen, you'd have to walk down the hallway in front of both the front and the back door because it was behind the living room. I kept on hearing strange noises, so before I left out of my brother's room, I told him to get in the closet and work on our fort so that it would be ready when I was done getting our drinks. I had a terrible feeling, a sense of dread. I could tell that something wasn't right, and this was a way to get my brother to hide without scaring him. He frightened easily and had really bad asthma attacks, and at this time, we had no inhaler or his breathing treatment machine for him. Yeah, way to go, Mom. I knew if he started having an asthma attack on top of being scared, it wouldn't be pretty. Anyway, I had left the back room and decided to see what was going on. I started sneaking up the hallway as slowly and quietly as I could. I was terrified. I could feel that something was wrong, and before I made it to the end of the hallway, I hear a man. It sounded like he was growling. It was a deep, terrifying noise. I can't explain it, but the feeling that washed over me damn near made me puke. So I of course freeze. I have no one in this town, I don't know anyone, and my dad is living in a different state, and my mom is at the bar drunk as hell. I was standing there trying to gather the courage to see what was around the corner, and going over my options when I hear my brother's door open. He sees me and the look on my face and freezes. I remember his eyes going so wide with fear because he must have heard the growl or whatever it was too. I motion him with my hands to go back in the room, and he thankfully does. I gathered the courage to peek around the corner, and what I saw still freaks me out till this day. It was horrifying. I saw a man probably around 6'6" and 300 plus pounds sitting on my couch with a wicked grin on his face. That grin and the look in his eyes will forever be burned into my head. By some stupid luck, the man didn't see me. I slowly snuck back into my brother's room and slowly shut the door and started going over my options. My little brother was already horrified because of the growling noise this man was making. I am so thankful he wasn't the one who saw what was out there. I mustered my brave big sister face and calmly told him that there was a man that I didn't know on the couch and that he needed to be very quiet and needed him to be brave. My little brother adored me and looked up to me, so when I told him that I needed him to be brave, he tried his best. The first thing I tried was the window, but it wouldn't budge. It was completely stuck. I'm making myself stay calm for my brother's sake, but I know it's sitting out there. So, since the window was stuck, I decided to start looking for a weapon. My older brother lived here, and I know he had swords somewhere. I still don't remember where he was. As I'm looking for a weapon, I hear the man say,
"I know you're here."
My stomach knotted up, and the hair on the back of my neck raised, and I instantly got a cold sweat. And then I hear it. My little brother started wheezing. Asthma attack. I hugged him, reminding him about being brave, and told him to sit still and focus on his breathing. I start frantically trying to get the window open, but it was still stuck. I looked around and started moving blankets when I find my older brother's cell phone that he always forgot. I remember thinking to myself that I was lucky and felt a bit of relief. I immediately called the police and told them what was going on, hysterical at this point but still remaining quiet. The dispatcher told me to remain on the phone so she could hear what was happening when the man started banging on our bedroom door. It had been about 5 minutes into the phone call when this happened, and I could no longer remain calm. I lost it and started screaming, and I mean blood-curdling screaming, the kind of screaming that would send chills down your spine if you heard it. I forgot to mention that our bedroom door had the only working lock, and he was trying to get in and banging on the door. His banging got louder and louder while still screaming to let him in, when it went completely silent. Then he did the creepiest, most terrifying thing ever. He started laughing. "You know I could just bust this door down in about 2 seconds, right, little girl?" At this point, he's lightly knocking on the door and asking for me to open it. His demeanor completely changed. I then heard a scraping noise at the door, and what I had imagined in my 12-year-old head was him scraping the door with really long fingernails or something. But that wasn't the case. Then I hear police start screaming at him to get on the ground, to put his hands up, etc. I hear him putting up a fight, followed by more yelling, and eventually, silence. After a few minutes, there was a knock on my door, but at this point I was too terrified to open it. I thought that this nightmare guy was still out there. So, being in my hysterical state, I started screaming, "No, no, no, please," over and over again, sobbing and shaking. I couldn't stay brave for my little brother anymore. I was on the floor holding him this whole time, convinced that we were going to die. I eventually calmed myself a bit, and this time a female officer was at the door, so I opened it. There were about 5 cops standing in the hallway, listening to me being hysterical. I refused to let go of my little brother at this point, but we both ran to this female officer and just collapsed, sobbing hysterically. We had been so scared. It turns out that this guy was completely wasted and high on drugs. I remember the cops walking me up to him and having me stand in front of him to ask me if I knew this man. I didn't. But I'll never forget standing in front of this huge man, looking into his brown eyes that were completely bloodshot and filled with hatred. I'll never forget that growling noise he was making either, or the look of pure horror in my brother's eyes. My parents had been called and investigated for leaving us alone like that, and for the doors being like that. My mom is a completely different person now. She doesn't drink and is now married to a cop. She completely changed. I remember asking her about it later on, and she told me something that I didn't know. The man had had a huge knife, and that's what he was scraping the door with. I still don't know how he didn't get to us or why he didn't just bust down the door to get us. It would have taken one half-assed kick from him to kick the door down. It was super thin. It still creeps me out, and I've had nightmares from it. My husband doesn't understand why I get so furious with him when he leaves the door unlocked at night. I work third shift, so I'll come home and the door will be unlocked. It's infuriating because I have to go through every room in the house and check the closets and the other places that a person could hide in. I have 2 kids now, and they will never, ever go through what I did.
My girlfriend and I had been living in our new apartment approximately 3 to 4 months at the time of this story. For clarification and background, we live in a basement level unit. The one and only entrance is inside the building and down the stairs. However, there's 4 windows facing nothing but a row of shrubbery and a tree line. It was roughly 9 through 10 p.m. She was at work for the evening and I had the place to myself. Lights on and TV blasting, I was sitting in the living room planning on eating trashy and binge-watching the remaining episodes of Broad City. Not long into it, however, I heard a scraping sound from the bathroom. My first thought, a mouse? Which was the last thing we needed. So I get up and make my way through the hallway as quietly as I can to catch a glimpse of it. The closer I got, the more I realized the scratching wasn't coming from the bathroom, but rather the window in the master bedroom. My next guess was it was simply kids playing outside, as they tend to do, or the bunny I had seen bouncing out there that morning. Even more likely, someone taking a dog out to pee. I paused. I tried to hone my hearing and then noticed it wasn't a sound echoing from outside, but rather scratching on the window itself. I started into the bathroom when I noticed the sound stopped and moved to the adjacent window in the room next to it. A smaller bedroom that gave us creeps as is. We never used it. There's no light source. It simply sits dark and empty aside from a few boxes of my clothing. Now thinking back, it was probably a bad idea. I'm a small girl, maybe 5'2", 90 pounds soaking wet, but I do have a bit of a spirit and a tad bit of a temper. I had hoped upon being discovered that whomever it was, obvious to me now that it was someone and not a something, would run off. I had caught him red-handed. So I steeled myself and yelled out, "I hear you. What do you want?" The scratching stopped instantly. I waited. After what felt like an eternity, I assumed the coast was clear. I made my way to the windowsill and slowly cracked the blinds. I don't know why I did that, because then he crouched, peering into me with the widest and wildest eyes I've ever seen on a person. Most certainly strung out on something. He told me to let him in. As shocked as I was, I almost laughed at the audacity, as if I was going to swing open the window and let him waltz in. Using the remaining courage I had mustered, I told him not so gently, "No, get away from my house." He again told me to let him in, to which I informed him I was calling the police and hurriedly proceeded to do just that. I even turned the phone to face him for added effect, hoping this act would scare or intimidate him. Anything to get this man to leave. Unfortunately, it had the exact opposite effect. He was seething, raging and practically foaming at the mouth. He drew back and punched the window hard, repeatedly slamming his fists and palms against the glass. The window started cracking, blood flinging up like a gore-filled movie effect. I was out of there fast, heart racing, slamming the door shut behind me. So tempted to run to the front door, but incredibly scared that he would just come around to the front of the building. It would take no time at all for him to do that. Torn and trapped, I picked up the nearest blunt object and placed myself in between the 2 doors. I figured whichever one moved first, I'd go out the other. I still had the phone to my ear, urging the 911 operator to get someone here fast. In my panicked state, I also feared for my girlfriend who would be coming home soon. I messaged her warning about what was going on. Eventually, sirens and pounding came to the front door. The police had arrived. I explained what had happened and they searched the apartment and area near the window, coming back with a set of keys that he had possibly dropped, but no sign of him other than the broken window. They took a sample of the blood splatter that was left on the glass. My girlfriend came home shortly after, having left work early and calling the police herself. I'm grateful she did. Maintenance had been notified and they threw up temporary boarding until it could be repaired. They never actually found that guy, or if they did, I didn't receive an update about it. I definitely didn't get any sleep that night.
This story happened a few months after Hurricane Maria passed through Puerto Rico, leaving most of the island without power, water, and telephone systems. During this time, I was living alone in the ground level of a small apartment complex in the middle of a rural area. I didn't have a power generator at the time, so most of my things were charged via solar panels. One night, I was suddenly woken up by a loud blood-curdling scream from outside my window. I couldn't make out the words the person was saying, or rather screaming. I thought it was a person needing help, but I quickly discovered that it wasn't. At first, I heard the screams from afar, but then the screams became louder and louder until it reached one of my windows. It was then when I discovered that it wasn't a cry for help, but rather gibberish. I saw a shadow of a man in the window thanks to the moonlight that night. It was a relatively tall man. He began to tap on my window while screaming gibberish again and again. At this point, I quietly grabbed a knife from my kitchen and, without making a sound, I checked the window once more, and he was still there, still screaming gibberish. The neighbor's dogs began to howl as in response, and it was horrifying. After what I could describe as the 10 longest minutes of my life, the man finally left. I waited a while and then grabbed a cell phone that I kept turned off for emergencies and dialed 911. After a few minutes, the police came, but they never managed to get the man.